Welcome to the session, everybody. And so I'm going to start off by asking Mahendra the question, what is AI and how's it created?
Thank you, Allan. That AI is basically a machine performing human cognitive function. It tries to imitate brain function. The underlying dimensions what machines use in this perspective is data, certain hypotheses, learning algorithms, and resource and certain processes. In this perspective, like machine learning is the core capability when we talk about AI. We are like there are various types of machine learning, supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement kind of learning algorithms, where machine either get supervision from a human to understand certain pattern, or it can identify certain patterns by itself. And particularly, if we consider reinforcement kind of learning algorithm, now AI has the capability to aware on the environment and learn based on certain policies and values that human created. So because of that, humans play a pivotal role when creating AI and drive the AI in right directions, creating values. Otherwise, AI perhaps not able to achieve what we want to achieve in terms of creating values. Now, I know that, Allan, you are leading lawyer and look into neurotech. And neurotech is now emerging as one of the key dimensions in AI. Now, how you see the future of neurotech and AI, and what kind of synergy that these two technologies bring into when creating values?
So I can start off with a current application. So some of neurotechnology has a therapeutic aim, so it's aimed at addressing, say, neurological conditions. So one currently FDA-approved application in the US is for drug-resistant epilepsy. So if somebody is getting epileptic fits and their fits are not responding to medication as well as is to be hoped, they can get a brain implant, and the brain implant, most of the time it does nothing. It just monitors the brain, but it has an AI dimension because it uses a machine learning approach to identify the neural precursors to an epileptic fit. And when it notices those neural precursors, it acts to stimulate the brain and to hopefully stop the epileptic fit, or at least stop most of them. And so it can be an effective treatment for some people who other treatments aren't working, and it's currently being used. It's in some people's heads in the US, for example. And moving into the future, the hope is that it's not just epilepsy. I mean, already there's neurotech is used in various other neurological conditions, and moving into psychiatric conditions like forms of depression. And so the hope is that a range of sort of medical psychiatric conditions can be treated, maybe ranging from Alzheimer's to epilepsy to locked-in syndrome to Parkinson's to depression to anxiety, even things like schizophrenia one day. And so there's a fair bit of commercial interest in it as a result of partly of this therapeutic dimension. And of course, there's not just therapeutic applications. There's also non-therapeutic applications. So people use neurotech for gaming, although I'm not sure how good the technology is at the moment, but it might one day become a good way of getting into the metaverse, using some sort of brain reading device. And the other applications are in the workplace. So there are some companies that have used brain monitoring neurotech. So that's not implanted in the brain, it's external, to monitor, say, the attention of a heavy goods vehicle driver or air traffic controller for signs of inattention. So it's a sort of health and safety type thing to try and prevent accidents. And then further to that, there's neurotech in the military context. There's the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency in America has long been looking at neurotech, and it might be possible for a soldier either with a brain implant or an external brain reading device to, say, for example, control a drone swarm, maybe with some augmented reality glasses, moving through the battlefield without having to control the drone swarm using his or her hands. Or it may be also possible to stimulate brains to increase attention. But just moving back more generally to AI, you've been thinking a lot about the what AI might be used for and what its advantages and disadvantages are. I've talked specifically about neurotech, but looking more generally to AI, what are its advantages and disadvantages? What should we be thinking about?
Thank you, Allan. I think when it comes to neurotech, human brain is performing a key function, working with other sensors, to having awareness. Now, I think consciousness also a subject nowadays in AI, making AI sentient, and people talk quite a lot. Now, when it comes to general context of the AI, we are more, there are some other areas coming in economic benefits as well as benefits to sustainability. Now, people identified AI can contribute quite a lot in productivity, in enhancing the productivity of the businesses, as well as creating new revenue streams, because there are quite a lot of data now gathered through human and machine interactions, and it identifies certain patterns and strategies. Now looking blue ocean strategy to create new revenue streams and integrate that with the digital workspace. Now that's a quite opportunity, and it says by 2030, AI can contribute to more than 15% world GDP growth, and it is equivalent to something like more than 15 trillion US dollars. That's significant. At the same time, AI is coming in as a contributor to the Sustainable Development Goals, and research identified more than 79% of United Nations Sustainable Development Goal targets can be drive with the capability in AI, which is quite significant. Now, significant, yeah. So that's while that is the benefit, AI is also work as a double-edged sword, because there are significant risks for humanity. Now, if you look into certain areas like autonomous weapons, you mentioned the defense, but there are certain areas like developing autonomous weapons which significantly violate human dignity. At the same time, it creates.
Toby Walsh has been talking about that, hasn't he?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. At the same time, socio and economic inequalities. I mentioned there are 15% GDP growth, but when we analyze further, we can see that GDP growth is not uniformly distribute across globe. Some of the developed countries get more share than developing countries. particularly like if we compare United States, China compared to Africa, we can see this discrepancy. Now that's
so
at the
exacerbating existing inequities then, or
exactly, yeah. So that's a significant risk, like deep fake, socioeconomic inequality, biases caused because of the data. So that is why governance and ethics are very important, and it's in leaders in board level or senior management level, or even in the operational level. We need to establish the right risk appetite and establish the right strategies to govern these AI initiatives for creating the value for humanity. Now, coming back to the neurotech, now this is a significant area that develop in future in line with AI. What kind of risks? What are the areas that audience should aware when we talk about neurotech?
So I think there's quite a lot. There's quite a lot to think about. So one thing is the epilepsy device that I described earlier. So one of the things it might do is collect brain data to share with the medical advisors, and of course that seems a good thing. You know, like it might be. The brain data might be useful to decide on further treatment or discontinuing treatment, or, you know, for a number of reasons. But one thing to bear in mind is these devices, generally neural devices, store data, and then there becomes a privacy dimension to it. So data might be used for one purpose to treat the condition, but then perhaps it could be remined for some other purpose. And of course, you know, if we think about things like hacking, then there's the security dimension to safeguarding data, and it may well be that given the kind of inferences that could be made from brain data, it's especially sensitive, you know, maybe even a bit more than other forms of kind of medical data. And there's a question as to whether the privacy rules are still fit for purpose. And then another issue is, you know, is sort of the combination of data. So let's say a company has got both data from social media and also neural data, and these sources of data are combined, and I'm using social media, and let's say I'm also using some form of neurotech. Then that company starts to know a lot about me, and they already knew quite a lot about me because of the other data, and now you add the neural data to it, and really a concern is one relating to manipulation. So it might be easier to influence people's behavior in a consumer setting, or perhaps in even a political setting or a workplace setting. So that's one aspect. Then the other aspect is, you know, you mentioned inequality, and then let's say some people start to use neurotech and others can't afford it, then and let's say neurotech can cognitively enhance or provide some capacities that are advantageous in the workplace or in business, or in some other competitive debate, then you might end up with this kind of divide between people that are, you know, getting some people that are kind of almost becoming transhuman, you know, starting to have capacities that others don't have, and there's issues of inequality and also perhaps discrimination against people that haven't got neurotech. So there's actually quite a lot to think about it. And the just recently, the Law Society of England and Wales published a report that I wrote on. That was the first one where a law body has addressed the legal issues. And I've just come back from Istanbul. I was talking to the Istanbul Bar Association about it. The UN's Human Rights Council, they've just asked for they just resolved that they need a report on it to think about the human rights implications of neurotech. So there's really quite a lot to think about in relation to neurotech, and given this commercial excitement, it's probably I think it would be a mistake to delay the thinking, and also actions probably needed, legal action.
Yeah.
Again, so that's a sort of specific example of a technology that's generally also facilitated by AI and some of the legal and ethical issues, but it sort of raises the question of more generally of governance, and so what. Thinking more generally about AI, why do we need AI governance? Apart from just in the context of neurotech, what kind of strategy should businesses be responsible? I mean, of course, laws can be made to direct a new technology, but hopefully businesses might also be minded to do that. So yeah, why do we need AI governance? What kind of strategy do we need to ensure more generally responsible AI?
Yeah, I think as I explained before, like there is a benefits and risks related to AI, which is quite that we need to govern while managing risks. We need to establish the right strategy to create best value for humanity. I think in this perspective, the bias is some kind of one of the main reason that creating risks in AI. So organizations need to think how and what kind of cultural dimensions and what kind of people and culture should drive towards driving AI projects and initiatives. For example, in this perspective, if we look into United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, we need to look into diversity, equity, inclusions aspects to mitigate biases. We need to look into gender equality and also reduce inequalities in the workspace and decision-making processes related to AI creation, which effectively mitigate biases in data and selection of the algorithms and establishing processes. That's part of the governance, and also establishing the right risk appetite, and also looking into ethical dimensions. Now, when it comes to organizations, we now know there are quite a lot of regulations, compliance, and policies emerging to control the AI. At the same time, there is ethics, which is coming the first place before the law, that how we orchestrate people and culture to establish the right ethics towards responsible AI and explainable AI. Yeah, so that's.
I think that's a good point. The law can do some things, but it shouldn't be all down to law. There's something that businesses can do.
Exactly. So, for example, there are different aspects of utilitarianism and consequentialism perspective of ethics play a role in AI. For example, if you look into consequentialism perspective, as I mentioned before, there is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals can be supported with AI, and the practitioners can look into sustainability through the lens of AI and support, which is quite play an ethical role from AI perspective. At the same time, we need to look into how AI works in terms of data, people, and processes, and we need to establish right AI creation process in utilitarianism perspective of ethics to drive human values in this process. So it's a part of the AI. There are different various strategies: operations, customer experience, brand, and sustainability in related to organizations. So there are quite a lot of frameworks emerging but for particularly ESG frameworks aligning with the data science. And I created a few frameworks, and I presented in certain frameworks in United Nations to supporting these sustainable development goals through AI. And there are some of the regulations and policies are emerging how to regulate certain aspects. For example, autonomous related job losses and significant risks which can be controlled through government participation. At the same time, there are like biases and inequalities create, and there are like democratization strategies which can be integrated through the compliance and policies. I think that the AI ethics and governance is very important, that to drive these capabilities for creating human values and driving human values in this process. Now, coming back to neurotech, now we know like in neurotech that when we talk about deep neural networks, we are talking about neurons, and brain is now completely a neural network, and we are now talking about something interfacing these two in the technology and the brain aspect, and then driving this emerging technology while we are leveraging the AI capabilities, which is actually a groundbreaking. Now, at the same time, now you are a lawyer and you are teaching criminal law. Now we know like when it comes to criminal law, there is a mens rea, guilty mind, play a role when judge certain action beyond reasonable doubt. And how you see this neurotech and technologies interfacing with the brain and people's action, how they are relates with the criminology? What's the dimension of these aspects in the criminal law perspective?
So I think there's actually quite a lot of criminal law dimensions to neurotech, and actually I don't think that's unusual. I suspect, you know, like if you looked at other areas of law, there would be neurotech would raise a lot of issues. But you know, although I used to be a commercial litigator, my focus is, as you mentioned, is on teaching criminal law at the moment. But you know, so one question is the criminal act. So you mentioned the mens rea, the guilty mind, but the prosecution have got to prove that, and they also have to prove that the defendant carried out the actus reus, which is most commonly an act. And most commonly it's a bodily act. Like people generally act through their bodies. You know, they throw punches, they use their finger to fire a trigger, or they utter words using the muscle systems in their mouths, or they nod their head and things like that. But the brain-computer interfaces create the possibility of acting in a way that doesn't use the body. So a person might be able to, say, for example, control a drone, a brain drone. And in America, they have brain drone racing now. That's something that already happens. The universities compete with each other to compete with drones, but somebody could fly a drone into someone else. And let's say they've got the guilty mind, they've got the intention to kill. But it's a slightly non-standard actus reus because they haven't used their body. And that's a rather strange question for the criminal law. And then you can imagine neurotech being used at sentencing. So, for example, you know, perhaps a person with some form of mental illness that's not enough for the mental health and cognitive impairment defense, and they're getting sentenced. And so now, instead of sending them to jail, what can happen now is a person might say, well, the lawyer might say, well, my client is going to be under the direction of professor, psychiatrist, and also they're going to keep taking the antipsychotic medications. So why don't you just allow them to serve the sentence in the community and not not send them to jail and just make them promise to keep taking the meds. Well, you could imagine a similar thing happening with a brain-computer interface that maybe acts to stimulate the brain to, say, stop an angry outburst, and it monitors the brain all the time. And then, of course, we're now into the thinking about the human rights dimension of all of this, which are, this is the kind of thing that caused the United Nations Human Rights Council to recently resolve that they want a report. And then, for more traditional kind of offences, of course, I'm old enough to remember when the law started to start to wrestle with the widespread use of the internet. And so one of the things that had to happen was hacking offences were created. And really, as we know, hacking is very much in the news, increasingly so now, and there's various offences. But then hacking into a database and stealing some data seems different, perhaps in a qualitative way, from, say, hacking into someone's neural device and perhaps causing it to electrically stimulate them. So there might need to be new hacking offenses. And so I think the upshot of it is that, that sort of AI systems is one of the things that is driving the advances in neurotech. It's not the only thing, also advances in understanding the brain, but these things are leading to a range of issues for the criminal law, for human rights, employment law. So, for example, brain monitoring. Can you say no if your employer asks you to wear a brain reading device? And there's a lot for lawyers to think about, and it's good that this kind of thing is starting to happen. So really, it's like the sort of developments that you're more familiar with, in conjunction with developments in neurotech, are starting to increasingly create interesting problems and questions for lawyers and ethicists and regulators.
It's a very complex domain. Now, can you a little bit tell something about related to metaverse, because metaverse is emerging, and it is now not only the physical environment what we are interact, but people are now working metaverse, and AI is like a cornerstone in metaverse because it captures quite a lot of our data, and then it will help people to transform our perceptions, our emotions through the digital workspace. So how you see, like, what kind of complexities it might emerge when metaverse and AI integrated and creating workspace?
Yeah, so for example, I think Facebook a while ago, they acquired Control Labs, which is a neural interface company. I think that's part of their reality labs at Meta as it is now. So there's some combining of neural interface. It's not a brain-computer interface. It's an interface that interfaces with the arm and reads neural activity from the arm. But you can, it might turn out that rather than wearing a big sort of clunky headset, it might be that a neural device is a good way of getting into the metaverse. And then, of course, all the privacy manipulation issues start to emerge from that. So I think it's perhaps those two technologies might go together. Perhaps they might not, but that seems to be a possibility. And it would raise these privacy manipulation type issues, maybe also the inequality and the hacking, and everything. All these issues could come up in that context.
So, Allan, finally, now we talk about AI, we talk about consciousness in AI, we talk about how AI can interface with brain through neurotech, and we talk about ethics and governance, and you mentioned quite a lot of risks in here. Now, looking into future, what might be the new professions should emerge to supporting these new dimensions of technology? These emerging technologies are quite complicated, and perhaps that our classic way of looking the capabilities might not enough to govern and manage these. What are the new roles and what kind of human augmentation that might be applied?
Okay. So I haven't thought generally about new roles. The one thing that I have thought about is legal roles. So since, you know, when I used to be a commercial litigator, and there was a very sort of routine job that junior lawyers like me used to do, and that was discovery, deciding which documents need to be given to the other side in a legal dispute and which ones don't, before, you know, as part of the legal process in a civil matter. And so now sort of AI systems have started to be employed in that area, and some of the big firms are using them. And there's a question, you know, how far up the chain of legal work will AI systems go? And that question is not just a theoretical question. It's a very sort of practical question for law firms, and they're spending money on these systems that reduce labor costs, and clients want that. You know, they don't want to pay for lots of lawyers working on something that's really quite routine. And now these AI systems are doing it. And as a result of that, one of the things that's happened in law firms is the rise of these people who are sort of, or in the legal profession, is the rise of people who you might think of as legal technologists. And these are people that, you know, they might have a background in, they might not even be qualified in law. They might have a background in data science or something like that. And yet they're very useful in law because they can work with these systems, and this is doing some legal work. And then I guess, you know, one of the things I thought about in my paper for the Law Society of England and Wales is that someone like a legal technologist, so let's say lawyers start using neurotechnology, and they use it for billing. Maybe instead of billable hours, there's billable attention, so you only pay for work when your lawyer's paying attention or something like that. Or maybe even lawyers start competing with each other and use neurotech to increase their attention so they can pay attention for longer, which would be useful, or to stimulate their brains to try and remember stuff more easily and things like that. Well, you know, like maybe there could be a role for a legal neurotechnologist, but this is really quite a bit speculative. But you know, there are these people working in law firms that weren't working there when I was there. There was the IT department and lawyers, but now there's this kind of legal technology thing, and you know, that perhaps something like that could happen. But
yeah, quite interesting. Yeah, beyond ethics and governance, there is a policy in the policies, compliance, and legal perspective. There is quite a lot of areas that law need to play in related to this AI. Thank you, Allan, and it is a quite informative discussion. Yeah. I think audience has taken quite a lot of information. Thank you.
I've enjoyed it too, and thanks for the great discussion. Thanks very much.